I would take 1,000 bullets for her. The words tore out of Sofia Voss before she could stop them. The air inside the black SUV was electric with tension, the leather seats cold against her bruised ribs, the smell of gunpowder and blood mixing with expensive cologne. Emma, 6 years old with dark curls and her father's penetrating eyes, was pressed against Sofia's chest, trembling, while Sofia felt the wet heat spreading across her back, her shoulder, her side. 3 bullets. She had counted them by the impact, by the way her body jerked forward each time, by the sound Emma made when Sofia wrapped around her like a human shield. Carlo was screaming into his radio. Sal was returning fire through the shattered rear window. And Nicholas Caruso, the most powerful man in Seattle's underworld, a man who controlled empires and crushed enemies without hesitation, was helpless in the front seat. His hands were shaking. His face was drained of all color. He reached back toward his daughter, his voice breaking in a way his men had never heard in 15 years of service. Hold her. Hold her. Do not let her go. Sofia's vision was tunneling. The checkered floor of Rosewood Diner flashed in her memory. The fluorescent lights humming like trapped insects. The $34 in her pocket that morning. The worn prayer card her mother had given her years ago, now soaked in blood. But what she did not understand in that moment was that the woman who ordered this hit was watching from a penthouse 12 blocks away, champagne in hand, absolutely certain that both Sofia and the child were already dead. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now let us go back. Let us go back to 3 hours earlier, to the moment when Sofia Voss sat alone in a vinyl booth at Rosewood Diner with nowhere left to go. The fluorescent strips hummed above her head like trapped insects. The clock on the wall read 3:56 in the afternoon. Sofia's swollen eye was half closed and purple-black where Douglas Hale's fist had connected that morning in the hotel kitchen when she refused his advances. Her left cheekbone throbbed. Her ribs ached with each breath. She sat alone in the booth, her thin fingers wrapped around a black coffee she had not paid for yet, her other hand hidden beneath the table, trembling. She was 28 years old but looked decades older. Her blonde hair, once long and healthy, now hung in a matted ponytail, dull and lifeless. Her eyes were pale blue but hollow, the kind of hollow that comes from 2 years of sleeping in shelter beds and eating meals from garbage cans behind restaurants. The uniform she wore, white blouse with a coffee stain on the collar, black pants worn thin at the knees, belonged to the Rosewood. It had been her job. Had been. Past tense. Douglas Hale had made sure of that. She had nowhere left to go. Her car was running on fumes, literally fumes, the fuel gauge wavering below empty for 3 weeks now. The shelter bed had been given to someone else this morning because Sofia had missed the 6 a.m. roll call by 15 minutes. 15 minutes. And the $34 in her pocket would not cover even one night of safety anywhere in this city. Sofia pulled out the prayer card from her jeans pocket. It was worn soft from handling, the edges curled and stained, a picture of St. Michael the Archangel on one side, her mother's handwriting on the back in fading blue ink. For protection. For strength. For the day when you remember that you are never truly alone. She had been alone for a long time. The bell above the door chimed. A waitress named Tara walked past, her arms full of plates, and she did not even glance at Sofia. That was how it worked now. Sofia was invisible. She had become the kind of person people looked through instead of at. Outside, the November sky was darkening. The weather report had warned of a blizzard moving in from the north, heavy snow expected by evening, roads beginning to seal. Sofia had heard it on the radio at the shelter before they kicked her out. She thought about her car, the 2008 Honda Civic with the rusted bumper and the tape holding the passenger window together, sitting in the Walmart parking lot 3 miles away. She thought about the 17 miles of highway between Seattle and the National Forest where she sometimes went to sit by the river and remember that water was always moving, always changing, never staying still. Movement. Change. That was the only constant in her life. The coffee was getting cold. Sofia drank it anyway. It tasted like nothing. Everything tasted like nothing anymore. At 5:15 p.m., the door to the diner opened and the temperature dropped. Not because of the wind, although there was wind, a sharp November wind that cut through the parking lot like a blade wrapped in ice. The temperature dropped because of the men. 3 of them. Black suits. Expensive suits. The kind of suits that cost more than everything Sofia owned, including her car and her shoes and the prayer card in her pocket. The first man was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvered at the temples. He was somewhere in his 50s but moved like someone younger, each step deliberate and controlled. His eyes were the color of a storm, gray and penetrating, and they swept across the diner with the calculated precision of a general surveying a battlefield. His name was Nicholas Caruso, though Sofia did not know this yet. The 2 men with him were Carlo and Sal. Carlo was younger, maybe early 30s, with a gold watch visible on his left wrist and a thin scar running from his left eye down to his cheekbone. Sal was broader, thicker, with the build of someone who had spent the last decade in a gym or in prison, maybe both. They sat in a booth 3 tables away from Sofia. They did not order anything. They just sat there, and the diner became very quiet. Sofia tried not to look at them. She kept her eyes on the prayer card, on the fading handwriting, on the image of St. Michael standing over the devil with a spear. She told herself to finish her coffee and leave. She told herself not to draw attention. She told herself that men like that did not notice women like her. But Nicholas Caruso noticed everything. He noticed the bruise on her face. He noticed the way her hands trembled. He noticed the worn prayer card and the $34 she had counted out 3 times to Tara for the coffee. She had not known she was counting it out loud, but she had. $3. $31 left. And he noticed the way she shrank when she became aware of being watched, the way she curled inward like something wounded. At 5:41 p.m., Nicholas Caruso stood and walked toward the counter. He ordered a coffee from Tara. While she was pouring it, he asked a question quietly, a question meant only for her ears, but Carlo heard it from the booth, and Sal heard it, and Sofia heard it too. The woman in the corner booth. What is her story? Tara's hand stilled. She looked at Sofia, then back at Nicholas. I don't know, she said. She comes in. She orders the cheapest thing. She sits. She leaves. I don't ask questions. You should ask questions, Nicholas said, and there was something in his voice, something like thunder, like an oath being made. Some people are worth asking about. He took the coffee and sat back down. He did not drink it. He just sat there, and every few seconds, his storm-grey eyes moved back to Sofia's corner. Sofia felt the weight of that attention like a physical thing. She felt it pressing down on her shoulders, and she knew something was about to change. She did not know what. She did not know how. But she knew, in the way that wounded animals know when a predator is circling, that the afternoon of November 15th was going to be a turning point. The prayer card trembled in her fingers. Outside, the first snow began to fall. The checkered black and white floor of Rosewood Diner reflected the dying neon lights like a broken mirror, and Sofia Voss sat alone in the corner booth at 3:41 in the morning, her backpack beside her containing every possession she still owned in this world. The fluorescent strips hummed above her head like trapped insects, and the silence stretched so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her chest, one fragile rhythm against the weight of everything that had collapsed around her that single terrible day. Her left eye was swollen completely shut. Purple-black bruising spread across her cheekbone like a map of violence, and her split lip was crusted with dried blood that had long since stopped tasting like copper and started tasting like shame. The handprints on her throat were still visible, 5 fingers and a thumb in the exact shape of Douglas Hale's grip, marks that seemed to pulse with their own dark life every time she swallowed. She was 28 years old but looked decades older. Her hair, once chestnut brown, hung in matted tangles past her shoulders. Her skin had the grey pallor of someone who had not slept in 36 hours and had not eaten in 48. The stale smell of coffee and grease hung heavy in the air, mixing with disinfectant so sharp it burned her nostrils. The red vinyl booth stretched into shadows on either side of her, and the only other person awake in the diner was Ruth, the waitress, a woman in her 70s with silver hair pinned back and a name tag that had been worn so many times the letters had faded into ghosts of themselves. Ruth approached with a coffee pot that looked like it had been there since the morning shift. The pot was stained with old rings of brown, and when she poured the coffee into the white ceramic cup, it steamed like something alive. Ruth's eyes, kind and weathered, moved across Sofia's face, and in that moment of professional assessment, Sofia saw the exact instant Ruth realized this was not just a cold traveler needing warmth. This was something far worse. This was a woman who had been broken and left on the side of the road. "You need anything else, honey?" Ruth's voice was soft, careful, the way people speak to frightened animals. Sofia shook her head and reached into the pocket of her coat, a thin thing from a thrift store that did not actually keep the cold out. She pulled out bills and coins, and her hands trembled as she counted them on the table. $1. 50 cents. $2 more. She had counted this money 3 times already that morning, and the total never changed, no matter how desperately she wished it would. "Toast," Sofia said, her voice barely a whisper. "Dry. Cheapest thing you have." The quarters and dimes in front of her totaled $4.50. Ruth looked at the coins, then looked at Sofia's face, and something in her expression hardened with a particular kind of rage that old people sometimes carry when they have witnessed too much suffering. "Toast is $5, Ruth said, but she was already moving toward the kitchen. "You'll eat it today for free." Sofia wanted to argue. She wanted to say she did not take charity, that she had pride, that she had standards. But pride was a luxury item, like health insurance or a roof that did not leak, and she had surrendered all of those months ago. So she sat in silence and listened to Ruth moving in the kitchen, the sound of bread dropping into a toaster, the mechanical ding when it popped back out. The truth was that Sofia Voss had not always been invisible. 14 months ago, she had a studio apartment. 13 months ago, she had a job at the Seattle Metropolitan Hotel as a housekeeping attendant, $5.25 an hour plus whatever tips guests left. Some days that was nothing. Some days it was $12. She saved every penny. She had a plan. She was going to take night classes at the community college. She was going to become a dental hygienist. She was going to have a life that did not involve scrubbing other people's bathrooms on her hands and knees. But then her mother got sick. Cancer does not announce itself politely. It does not give warnings. It simply arrives one day in a mammogram and then never leaves. The treatments cost everything. The surgery cost more than everything. Sofia worked double shifts. She borrowed against her future like it was collateral she could cash out. The hospital sent bills that seemed to arrive daily, each one stamped in red letters, "Final notice." "Past due." "Collection agency involvement pending." $47,000. That was the number. That was what her mother's 73 days of survival cost when she finally gave up fighting and let the morphine carry her into silence. Sofia sold her mother's ring. She sold her television. She sold her textbooks that she had purchased for the night classes she never got to take. She stopped paying rent. She moved into a women's shelter on Capitol Hill and worked whatever hours the hotel would give her, and she was doing fine, she was managing, she was surviving. Until this morning. Until Douglas Hale. The hotel kitchen was always hot, always loud, a place where the line cooks screamed at each other in Spanish and the dishwashers moved like ghosts through the steam. Sofia was refilling the paper towel dispensers at 9:15 in the morning when Douglas Hale found her alone near the industrial dishwasher. He was a manager, 42 years old, with a kind of thick neck that suggested he had once been muscular and had allowed himself to soften into entitlement. His breath smelled like coffee and something rotten underneath. "You got a minute?" he asked, and his voice had already taken on the tone of someone who did not care about the answer. Sofia turned, and he was standing too close. She could see the broken capillaries in his nose, the sweat staining the collar of his white dress shirt even though it was still morning. She said nothing, and her silence seemed to excite him because he stepped closer. "Evelyn's been noticing you," he said. "Evelyn Blackwell, the owner." She likes your work. Thinks you're talented. He reached out and touched Sofia's hair, his fingers gripping a strand. I think so too. Sofia stepped back. The heat from the industrial dishwasher was intense against her spine, and she could not move backward anymore. I need to finish my shift, she said. You will finish your shift, Douglas said, and he was smiling now, a smile that was not a smile but a baring of teeth. After you finish, you and me, we're going to talk about a promotion. Better pay. Much better pay. Maybe you come to my apartment. We talk privately. Sofia moved to walk past him. She moved quickly, decisively, the way wounded animals sometimes run. But Douglas grabbed her throat. His hand was so large that his fingers wrapped around the back of her neck and his palm covered the front, and he slammed her backward against the dishwasher with force that knocked all the air out of her lungs. She fought. She fought with everything that remained in her, her nails digging into his face, drawing blood in 3 long scratches. She kneed him once, twice. But he was heavier and he was stronger, and his other hand was forming a fist, and she thought, this is how people die, this is how they disappear. But then she twisted, suddenly and with all the desperation of someone with nothing left to lose, and she broke free from his grip. She ran. She ran through the kitchen and up the stairs, and she did not stop running until she was in the locker room pulling on her coat. What she did not know was that Evelyn Blackwell had been watching through the security cameras. Evelyn saw everything. Evelyn knew everything. And Evelyn's calculations were swift and precise, the calculations of a woman who understood that Douglas Hale was useful and Sofia Voss was not. When Sofia was called to Evelyn's office on the 41st floor, the owner was sitting behind a desk made of glass and steel, and she did not even look up when Sofia entered. Evelyn Blackwell was 47 years old and looked like money had been spent on preserving her, which it had. Her blonde hair was cut in a style that probably cost more than Sofia's monthly rent. Her suit was Chanel, a color called champagne that seemed to glow with its own light. On her wrist was a watch that cost more than a used car. You're terminated, Evelyn said, still not looking up. Pack your personal items and leave the building. I didn't do anything, Sofia said, and her voice cracked like ice breaking. He attacked me. I defended myself. Now Evelyn looked up. Her eyes were blue, the color of a winter sky, and they held no mercy. You assaulted a manager. That's grounds for immediate termination. No final paycheck. No severance. Leave. Sofia walked out of the hotel with her backpack, which contained 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and a worn prayer card with the image of St. Christopher printed on its faded cardstock. The card had belonged to her mother. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, was a single sentence: when you are lost, remember that miracles are just prayers that have not arrived yet. Sofia had not prayed in years. She did not believe in miracles. But she held the prayer card now anyway, the way drowning people hold onto anything floating. The shelter told her they had given away her bed at 9 p.m. when she did not arrive. Full capacity. Rules were rules. There was a waiting list 3 months long. Sofia sat in the freezing evening air outside the shelter and counted her money. $34. That was all that remained of everything she had in the world. Her car was a 1998 Honda Civic, beige with a rust spot on the left fender that looked like a map of Australia. She had paid $1,200 for it 3 years ago. The heater had never worked properly. She had used newspapers and plastic bags to insulate the windows. The check engine light had been on so long that the dashboard was permanently illuminated by its orange glow. She turned the key. The engine turned over, coughed, died. She tried again. It caught this time, and she pulled out into the Seattle evening with no plan except to drive north and hope that somewhere beyond the city limits, things might be cheaper, or that she might simply drive off a cliff and end this particular nightmare. The snowstorm arrived suddenly, the way nature's worst things always arrive. One moment the road was wet pavement. The next moment it was white chaos, the flakes so thick she could barely see the hood of her car. The heater rattled uselessly. Her breath fogged the windshield. She could feel the cold pressing against the windows like something alive and hungry. She made it 2 miles past the city limits before the engine ceased. It did not die gradually. It simply stopped, as if the car had made a decision and was done living. Sofia coasted to the median and sat there for a moment, listening to the wind howl through the frame of her vehicle, a sound like something dying. She had $34. She had a backpack containing everything she owned. She had a prayer card and a swollen eye and a throat that still hurt when she swallowed. She opened the car door. The wind hit her like a physical force, like a blade wrapped in ice, and the snow came down so thick and so cold that within seconds her vision was reduced to nothing. She could barely see her hands in front of her face. She stepped away from the car, and the median seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions, empty and white and absolutely final. It was in that moment, with the snow erasing the world around her, that she heard the sound of engines approaching. Heavy engines. Multiple vehicles moving fast through the storm. Red lights appeared first, cutting through the white like wounds opening in the darkness. Then the vehicles themselves emerged from the snow like something being born. Black SUVs. 4 of them. Moving in perfect formation. The black SUVs emerged from the white chaos like ghosts, for vehicles moving in perfect formation despite the blizzard that had sealed every road leading out of Seattle. Red lights cut through the snow first, then the vehicles themselves, materializing from the white like something being born. Inside the lead SUV, Carlo gripped the steering wheel with both hands, his jaw tight, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the relentless flakes. Nicholas Caruso sat in the back seat, his 6'3" frame folded into the leather, silver threading through his dark hair catching the red glow of the taillights. A scar ran along his jaw from his right ear to his chin, a permanent reminder of his father's belt buckle when Nicholas was 9 years old. Beside him, Sal watched the road with the attention of a man trained to spot danger in every shadow. The meeting in Everett had taken longer than expected. Business with the Ramirez family always did. But Nicholas wanted to be home. Emma had asked him that morning if he would read to her tonight, and he had promised. At 6 years old, she still believed her father's promises meant something sacred. He intended to keep that faith alive as long as he could. Carlo leaned forward slightly. Something ahead. Left side of the median. Nicholas's eyes sharpened. In 15 years, Carlo had learned to trust his own instincts about what didn't belong. The road was empty. No cars, no travelers foolish enough to be driving in this storm. But there, barely visible against the white, was the shape of something. Or someone. "Stop," Nicholas said quietly. The convoy slowed. Through the snow, a figure became visible. A person stumbling in the median, arms outstretched as if trying to embrace the wind that was clearly trying to kill them. As they watched, the figure fell. One moment upright, the next collapsed into the snow, disappearing almost entirely. Sal made a sound, something between surprise and concern. "There's someone out there." Nicholas was already opening the door. Cold rushed in like an invasion, the wind carrying snow that stung exposed skin. He stepped into the blizzard, his expensive cashmere coat, worth more than most people's monthly rent, immediately saturated. He moved toward the figure with purpose, each step deliberate despite the treacherous footing. As he drew closer, details emerged from the white. A young woman. Thin. Shaking so violently her entire body convulsed. Bruises darkened her face. One eye swollen nearly shut, purple-black and grotesque. Her lips were blue. Her fingers had already lost their color. She was wearing nothing but a thin jacket and jeans, no coat, no hat, no gloves. How long had she been out here? Minutes felt like an eternity in weather like this. Nicholas knelt beside her. Up close, he could see the handprint on her throat, purple and fresh, fingers clearly visible. His jaw tightened. He knew those marks. He had seen them before, on his mother's skin, her neck bruised in the shape of someone's rage. The side of her head was bleeding where she had struck the pavement. "Can you hear me?" His voice cut through the wind like something solid. The woman's eyes flickered open, barely conscious. Her teeth chattered so violently he worried they might crack. She tried to speak but no words came, only a sound like wind through broken glass. Nicholas lifted her without hesitation. She weighed almost nothing, fragile as something that might break if he breathed too hard. He carried her back to the SUV, the snow swirling around them both. "Heat," he commanded as he slid into the back seat with her still in his arms. "Full blast. Now." Carlo's hands moved across the dashboard. The heater roared to life, hot air flooding the cabin. Sal twisted in the front seat, already pulling off his jacket. "Wrap her," Nicholas said. The woman, Sofia, though he didn't yet know her name, tried to speak. Her voice came out in fragments, barely a whisper. "I can't. I don't have money. I can't pay." "Nobody's asking you to pay," Nicholas said, and his voice sounded different now, something gentler underneath the command. "You're safe now. Just breathe." He held her while the vehicle moved through the storm, his coat draped over her shaking form. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her lips moving silently, words that never quite formed. Up close like this, he could see the bone structure of her face beneath the bruises, could see that underneath the damage was someone striking. She couldn't have been more than 28, but hardship had aged her eyes until she looked a decade older. "Call Dr. Martinez," Nicholas said to Sal without looking away from the woman's face. "Tell him we're bringing someone in. Hypothermia. Head trauma. Tell him to be ready." 20 minutes passed. The woman's shaking gradually lessened, either because her core temperature was rising or because she was slipping deeper into shock. Either way, it was not an improvement. Nicholas kept his hand on her shoulder, his palm steady and warm, his dark eye studying her with an intensity that made Carlo exchange a long glance with Sal in the rearview mirror. In 15 years of working for him, Carlo had never seen Nicholas Caruso touch a stranger like this. Had never seen his expression soften in quite this way. The convoy climbed into Capitol Hill, moving toward one of Nicholas's properties, a secure apartment building overlooking the city, not the main house where Emma slept. The black SUVs pulled into the underground garage. The doors opened. Cold air rushed in. Sal ran ahead, already on his phone with final instructions. Dr. Martinez was waiting in the apartment when they carried Sofia inside. He was an older man, maybe 60, with steady hands and the kind of eyes that had seen injury too many times to be shocked by anything. He took one look at Sofia's bruised face, her neck, her trembling limbs, and understood immediately. Assault. Exposure. This was violence made flesh. "Bedrooms prepared," Dr. Martinez said, already moving with purpose. Nicholas carried her there. A guest room with grey walls and winter sunlight filtering through gauze curtains. He laid her on the bed with as much care as if she were made of glass. Dr. Martinez shooed him out with a polite but firm gesture. "She needs privacy to change. I'll need to examine her properly." Nicholas waited in the living room for nearly an hour. When Dr. Martinez finally emerged, his expression was grave. "Mild hypothermia, she's responding well to the warmth," he said. "Concussion, but not severe. Bruised ribs. Defensive wounds on her hands. Someone hit her. Recently. Within the last few hours." He paused. "She's been physically intimate with someone against her will. Multiple times. There's evidence of older injuries as well. This isn't the first time." Something cold and dangerous stirred in Nicholas's chest. He kept his voice level. "What does she need?" "Rest. Warmth. Food. Safety. And possibly counseling when she's ready. The physical wounds will heal. The others." Dr. Martinez trailed off meaningfully. "Those take longer." Nicholas found Maria, his housekeeper, already laying out fresh clothes in the guest room. Clean sheets. Soft blankets. The prayer card from Sofia's backpack on the nightstand, placed with obvious care by someone who understood what such things meant. "When she wakes, bring her food," Nicholas said. Nothing heavy. Broth. Bread. Something warm. And stay with her if she wants company. Don't leave her alone. Maria nodded. She had worked for Nicholas for 8 years and had learned to understand the difference between his orders and his requests. This was a request wrapped in the shell of a command. But what neither of them knew was that Douglas Hale, his face scratched and bleeding where Sofia's nails had torn his skin, was already making phone calls from his apartment across the city. His voice shook with rage and fear as he dialed, as he explained to his contacts in organizations that rivaled Nicholas's that he had a problem, and the problem was named Sofia Voss. He didn't mention assault. He didn't mention a man who had bruised him and kicked him out into the snow. He mentioned only that she had stolen from him, that she had caused him embarrassment, that she needed to disappear. The seed of the lie took root in soil already prepared by years of tension between families. Sofia woke 16 hours later to silence and sunlight. Her eyes opened slowly, consciousness returning like a tide coming in. She didn't recognize the room. Her body ached, but differently now, less like lightning and more like the steady throb of healing. She lay still for a long moment, trying to remember. The blizzard. The car dying. The sound of engines. The man with the scar. The SUV. The heat. Everything else was fragments. Her backpack sat on a chair near the window. Her clothes, folded neatly beside it. The prayer card her mother had given her 17 years ago, now sitting on the nightstand, placed carefully like an offering. She picked it up with trembling fingers. Her mother had died when Sofia was 11. The card had been one of the last things she had touched before the cancer took her, before Sofia learned that the world did not care for gentleness. A knock at the door. A woman's voice, warm and accented. "Miss? You are awake." Maria entered with a breakfast tray, soup, bread, tea, fresh fruit. She helped Sofia sit up, adjusted pillows with practiced care, asked carefully how much pain she was in, pointed to a bathroom where there were fresh towels and anything Sofia might need. She said the word home once, casually, as if this place was safe, as if safety was something that could just exist for people like Sofia. It was the kindest lie anyone had ever told her. "Mr. Caruso would like to speak with you when you're ready," Maria said before leaving. "No rush. Rest as long as you need." 2 hours later, Sofia stood in the living room, wearing borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit but felt infinitely better than her own. The room was all clean lines and expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's skyline, a gas fireplace burning steadily. Nicholas Caruso sat in an armchair by the window, dressed in black jeans and a grey sweater, looking less like the commanding figure from the blizzard and somehow more intimidating for it. Power at rest was still power. He looked up when she entered, and his dark eyes tracked her movement across the room. "How are you feeling?" She stopped several feet away, still maintaining distance as if that might protect her from whatever this was. "I don't understand," she said, and her voice was steadier now, though still fragile. "Why would you help me? What do you want?" He gestured to the sofa across from him. "Sit. Please." She sat, perched on the edge like a bird ready to flee. "My name is Nicholas," he said. He didn't use his last name, didn't announce himself the way powerful men often did. "What's yours?" "Sofia. Sofia." He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. "I helped you because I saw someone who needed help. That's all." She didn't believe him. She couldn't afford to. Nobody does something for nothing. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He stood and walked to the window, his silhouette framed against the grey Seattle skyline. When he spoke, his voice was different. Lower. More careful. "Maybe I know what it's like to have nowhere to go," he said. "My father was a man named Angelo Caruso. He drank. He used his fists on my mother and on me. South Seattle, 1990s. Poverty so thick you could taste it. By the time I was 14, I was big enough to hit back. I did. He left and never came home. But by then the damage was done. My mother had spent everything we had. We were evicted. We lived in a car for 3 months. I was 14 years old, and I swore that someday, nobody under my care would ever be that desperate again. That's why I helped you, Sofia. She listened to every word, searching his face for the lie. But his eyes held something true. They held recognition. The recognition of someone who had genuinely lived in the dark. The door opened. A child's voice, small and curious. "Papa." A little girl appeared in the doorway, maybe 6 years old, dark curls in pigtails, wearing a school uniform with a pink backpack. "Emma." She saw Sofia and stopped, suddenly shy in the way children are with strangers. Nicholas's entire body language changed. Softened. He smiled in a way that transformed his face completely. "Emma, come here. I want you to meet someone. This is Sofia. Sofia, this is my daughter, Emma." Emma approached slowly, her dark eyes, identical to her father's, studying Sofia with careful consideration. "Are you staying for dinner?" she asked without preamble. Sofia felt something crack open inside her chest. This was a child raised with safety, with certainty of care, asking if a stranger would join them for dinner like that was a normal, natural thing to offer. When was the last time anyone had asked her to share their meal? When was the last time anyone had offered her anything without expecting something in return? If that's okay," Sofia said softly. Emma's face brightened. She slipped her hand into her father's. "You can sit next to me." Nicholas looked at Sofia, and something unguarded crossed his expression. Later that evening, after Emma had eaten and drawn pictures and been tucked into bed, a task Nicholas performed himself, reading bedtime stories with his deep voice gentle enough to soothe a wild thing. He and Sofia talked on the balcony overlooking Seattle's glittering lights. "I have a proposal," he said. "A legitimate business. An art gallery in Pioneer Square. I need someone to manage it. The salary is $125,000 per year. Full benefits. Health insurance. An apartment. I can start you Monday." Sofia's hands shook so badly she had to clasp them together. "Why would you help me? I'm nobody." Nicholas turned to face her fully, and his voice dropped to something she felt in her bones. "You're not nobody. And everyone deserves a second chance." But what Nicholas didn't know was that 5 miles away, in a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, Evelyn Blackwell stood with a photograph in her hand. It showed Sofia exiting his building, her hand briefly touching his arm. The private investigator had been efficient. The report was detailed. And Evelyn Blackwell was already working the angles, already making calls, already setting wheels in motion that would soon collide with Nicholas Caruso's carefully ordered world. She smiled as she poured her champagne, pleased with the complication she had just created. The fluorescent lights of the Seattle Aquarium parking garage hummed their mechanical song, a sound Sofia would later realize was the moment everything changed. The rain fell in thick, heavy sheets, drumming against the concrete roof 3 stories above street level. Emma's small hand gripped Sofia's left hand while Nicholas held her right, the little girl chattering about seahorses and jellyfish, her voice bright and unburdened in a way that made Sofia's chest ache with tenderness. They walked toward the black SUVs, Carlo ahead of them, Sal behind. Nicholas had insisted on the security detail for Emma's birthday outing, though he'd kept it light, unobtrusive. The parking garage was nearly empty, a Tuesday afternoon, most people at work or home or anywhere but here. That was when Carlo's body went rigid. His hand moved to his jacket in one fluid motion, and his voice cut through the garage like a blade. Weapons. 12 o'clock. 3 men emerged from behind a concrete pillar. Guns drawn. Movement synchronized, professional, trained. This was not a mugging. This was a contract. Nicholas's arm swept around Emma, pulling her close. His voice dropped to the tone that made men tremble. "Get down." But Sofia was standing between Emma and the guns. In that fraction of a second, the space between heartbeats where time seemed to fold, Sofia saw the barrels pointing. She saw Emma's eyes widening. She saw the moment the shooter's fingers began their gentle squeeze on the triggers. And she moved. Sofia's body became a shield. She threw herself over Emma, wrapping the small girl completely, turning her own back to the weapons. Nicholas's arms came around them both, but Sofia was the barrier, Sofia was the buffer, Sofia was the only thing standing between a 6-year-old child and 3 bullets traveling at 2,000 feet per second. The first shot tore through the parking garage with a sound like thunder splitting open the sky. The bullet entered Sofia's left shoulder, spinning her body sideways. Pain exploded white-hot through her collarbone and down her arm. She gasped but did not release Emma. The second shot came less than a second later. It found her right side, below the ribs, punching deep through muscle and tissue. Sofia's breath left her body. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She could taste blood on her tongue. The third shot grazed across her back, tearing through skin and sinew, adding another line of fire to the agony that was already consuming her. Her legs trembled but held. Emma screamed, a sound of pure terror that cut deeper than any bullet could have. Sofia's arms tightened around her. It's okay, I've got you," Sofia whispered, though her voice sounded strange and far away. Carlo's gun roared, the sound enormous in the enclosed space. A shooter dropped, his weapon clattering across concrete. Sal's weapon fired 3 times in rapid succession, controlled, deadly accurate. The second shooter went down. The third shooter was already running, limping badly, one arm hanging useless at his side. Carlo pursued, but Nicholas did not move. Nicholas stayed with Sofia and Emma. His hands found Sofia's face, tilting her chin up. His eyes, those dark eyes that had witnessed decades of violence, widened with a terror Sofia had never seen before. "Stay with me. Stay with me, Sofia." She tried to speak, but the words would not come. Instead she said the only thing that mattered. "Is she okay? Emma, is she?" "She's fine. Because of you. She's fine." Nicholas pulled Emma close, his own body shaking. "An ambulance. Now," he said into his phone, his voice like ice. "Priority. Sofia Voss. 3 gunshot wounds. St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling ahead." Red and blue lights began to strobe across the garage walls. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, closer. Sofia felt her body beginning to shut down, felt the cold creeping in from the edges of her consciousness. But she could still feel Emma's small hand gripping her fingers. She could still feel Nicholas's presence like a fortress around them both. The wounded shooter was caught 3 blocks away, collapsed in an alley, bleeding out slowly. When the police found him and the federal agents arrived, interrogation took less than 6 hours. He was young, desperate, had been offered $8,000 by a man named Douglas Hale, who had been paid by a woman named Evelyn Blackwell. The target was Emma Caruso. Sofia was collateral, an inconvenient witness. The shooter gave up names, dates, payment records, everything. He had a family. He wanted a deal. But there would be no deal. Nicholas recorded the interrogation himself, sitting across from the shooter with Carlo and Sal flanking him like stone sentinels. The young man broke almost immediately when Nicholas leaned forward and said, very quietly, "You tried to murder a 6-year-old child. Tell me everything, and tell me true, and perhaps you will live long enough to regret it." Everything spilled out like water from a broken dam. By dawn, federal agents moved simultaneously on 2 fronts. The first team hit Douglas Hale's apartment at the Cascadia Hotel at 6 in the morning. News helicopters were already overhead, cameras positioned by Nicholas's contact at the FBI. Douglas was dragged from his bed in boxer shorts and a stained white t-shirt, handcuffs snapping around his wrists while cameras flashed and journalists shouted questions. "Douglas Hale, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder of a child, assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm, and racketeering in connection with organized crime." The agent's voice was steady and loud enough for every camera to catch. Douglas screamed denials as they walked him through the hotel hallway, past the kitchen where he had once backed Sofia into a corner, past the staff who had witnessed his cruelty for years. His face was pale, his body shaking. He looked smaller in handcuffs than he had ever looked with Sofia. Federal prison. 40 years. No possibility of parole. The second team arrived at Evelyn Blackwell's penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay at 6:45 in the morning. Evelyn answered the door in a silk robe the color of champagne, a coffee cup in one hand, absolute certainty in her eyes that her lawyers would handle this minor inconvenience. The agents had a search warrant, financial records, recorded communications, and a federal prosecutor waiting for her at the courthouse. Within an hour, Evelyn Blackwell was led from her penthouse in handcuffs, her hair not perfectly styled, her makeup not immaculate, her face the color of ash. The photographers caught every moment. The society pages that had praised her for so many years now ran headlines about conspiracy, about attempted child murder, about the systematic cruelty hidden beneath designer clothes and charitable galas. Federal prison. 45 years. Her assets frozen. Her hotels seized by the government. Her name transformed from a synonym for elegance into a symbol of calculated evil. Too quick and too easy would have been death. This was systematic obliteration. This was the complete and permanent destruction of everything she had built, every network she had cultivated, every friendship she had relied upon. The prosecution ensured it was public, that former friends would not answer her calls, that her name would be synonymous with the attempted murder of a child for the rest of her very long prison sentence. Douglas Hale, in his federal holding cell awaiting trial, tried to blame Evelyn. Evelyn, in hers, tried to blame Douglas. Neither strategy worked. The evidence was overwhelming. The public sentiment was unified. And in a penthouse overlooking the Seattle skyline, a little girl named Emma slept peacefully for the first time in days, safe in the knowledge that the people who had tried to hurt her would never try again. In a hospital room at St. Mary's, Sofia Voss lay in a narrow bed with bandages across her shoulder, her ribs, her back. The surgeons had worked for 8 hours and 15 minutes to extract the bullets, to repair the damage, to stitch her broken body back together. The doctors said she would recover. The doctors said she was fortunate. The doctors did not understand that survival was not luck. Survival was a choice she had made in that parking garage, and she would make it again, every day, for as long as she lived. Nicholas sat in the chair beside her bed, having not left in 23 hours. His hand held hers. His eyes watched her chest rise and fall, the rhythm of her breathing proof that she was still here, still fighting, still alive. Carlo brought food he did not eat. Sal made phone calls in hushed tones, updating the organization, telling them that the threat had been eliminated, that the family was safe, that normalcy would resume. But nothing would ever be normal again. Not after this. Sofia Voss lay in a narrow hospital bed at St. Mary's Medical Center, bandages wrapped tight across her shoulder, her ribs, her back. The surgeons had worked for 8 hours and 15 minutes extracting the 3 bullets, repairing tissue and bone, stitching her fractured body back together like some delicate restoration. Afternoon light filtered through the blinds in thin golden lines. The monitors beside her bed beeped in steady rhythm, proof of heartbeat, proof of survival, proof that she had chosen to stand in front of Emma Caruso and had paid the price in lead and blood. Nicholas Caruso sat in the vinyl chair beside her, having not moved in 23 hours. His expensive suit was wrinkled now, the white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He hadn't shaved. His dark eyes, usually sharp as obsidian, were hollow with exhaustion. His hand held hers with careful precision, as if she might shatter beneath his touch. Every few minutes he looked at her chest rising and falling, that simple rhythm the only thing that mattered anymore. Carlo stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his massive frame filling the space. He'd been rotating shifts with Sal, one of them always stationed outside the room, weapons concealed, watching. Watching. Always watching. Because Douglas Hale was in federal custody awaiting trial, and Evelyn Blackwell sat in a holding cell, but the world still contained threats, and Sofia Voss had proven she couldn't be left unguarded. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and Nicholas leaned forward, his jaw clenching. "Don't move," he said quietly. His voice was rough, scraped raw. "The doctor said you need to rest." "How long?" Sofia's voice came out fractured, each word a small battle against the pain. "How long have you been here? Does it matter?" "Yes." He pressed his lips together. 23 hours. She tried to smile and failed. "You have an empire to run. Carlo and Sal are handling it." He adjusted the blanket covering her, his movements precise and gentle in a way that contradicted everything his hands had ever done. "The organization can survive without me for a few days. You cannot survive without rest." The door opened and Emma appeared, a small figure in a white dress with a pink cardigan, her dark hair in braids. She carried a notebook and a box of colored markers. When she saw Sofia, her serious face transformed into pure radiance. "You woke up." Emma rushed forward, but Nicholas caught her gently by the shoulder. "Carefully, Moya Lyubov. Sofia is still healing." Emma climbed onto the edge of the bed with exaggerated care, setting her art supplies on the mattress. "I drew you pictures. Look." She opened the notebook. Inside were dozens of drawings, stick figures holding hands, a house with flowers, Emma and Sofia in a car with a blue sky above. The child's artistic skill was developing, but the emotion in each image was devastating. "I drew our life. When you get better, we're going to do all these things together." Sofia's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother hiding. "All of them?" "All of them," Emma confirmed with absolute certainty. She paused, her small hand resting on Sofia's arm. "Colors for sad days. When you feel sad, look at this." She pointed to a page full of impossibly bright rainbows, chaotic and joyful. "Because sad days don't stay forever." Nicholas watched his daughter place her head gently against Sofia's uninjured side, this child who had grown comfortable with physical affection because of the woman lying in this bed. His hands, accustomed to ordering violence, had learned instead to braid Emma's hair. His voice, trained to deliver threats, had learned to read bedtime stories in an accent that made his daughter laugh. And this, watching Emma rest against Sofia while the monitors beeped their steady affirmation of life, this was something he had not expected to want this badly. "She asks about you every day," he said quietly. "Since you went into surgery. Every morning before school, every afternoon when I pick her up." "Is Sofia awake? Can I visit Sofia?" "I told her we had to wait until you were strong enough." "I'm strong enough now," Sofia whispered. "You took 3 bullets, Sofia. Your lung partially collapsed. The scar tissue will take months to heal." He paused, something raw crossing his face. "You were not supposed to do that. You were supposed to be safe while I protected Emma. Plans change." Sofia's hand tightened on his. "You taught me that people matter more than plans. Emma mattered more than my life. That was a math problem that solved itself." Nicholas stood abruptly, walking to the window. His reflection in the glass looked like a man coming apart at the seams. "I have spent 37 years building a life based on a single principle, that no one under my watch would suffer the way I suffered as a child. That everyone connected to me would be protected, would know safety, would never be abandoned." He turned back to face her. "Then I found you on a highway in a blizzard, and that principle became infinitely more complicated." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I told myself everything I did was for Emma, for my men, for my code. But then a woman with bruises on her face and $34 to her name lay on my kitchen table, and suddenly protection became personal. It became about her breathing, her healing, her future." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And when she threw herself in front of gunfire meant for my daughter, I understood something I have spent my entire life avoiding understanding. Love is not something you can control or manage or protect yourself against. It is something that happens to you like a bullet you do not see coming." Sofia couldn't find words. There were no words adequate to contain what lived in this moment: a room at St. Mary's, a man in wrinkled Armani, a child drawing rainbows, and the terrible, beautiful fact of survival. "I need you to understand something," Nicholas continued, returning to the chair but not sitting, standing instead with his hand braced against the mattress. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure nothing ever hurts you again. And I do not care if that is a promise I cannot keep. I will spend every day trying anyway. Because you mattered when no one else could see your value. You mattered when you were nobody. And now you matter to people who have enough power to move mountains, and we will use that power to build you a life so safe, so secure, so full of everything you deserve, that you will never again have to count $34 and wonder how you will survive the night. Nicholas? Let me do this. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. After everything you have endured, you have earned the right to be cherished without negotiation, without question, without hesitation." Emma was asleep on Sofia's arm, her breathing slow and peaceful. In the hallway outside, Carlo made a phone call in hushed Italian, reporting to Sal that the boss was still with her, that nothing had changed, that the vigil would continue. 3 weeks passed. Sofia progressed through physical therapy with grim determination, her scars fading from angry red to pale pink. Nicholas arranged for private nurses, the finest surgeons, all the machinery of his wealth and influence bent toward her recovery. Carlo taught her how to move without aggravating the wound sites. Sal brought her food from expensive restaurants outside the hospital, trying to restore the weight she had lost. Emma came after school every day, sometimes bringing homework, sometimes bringing drawings, always bringing the particular light that only a child can carry into a room. She told Sofia about her teacher, her friends, the book they were reading in class. She held Sofia's hand during physical therapy, her small face serious with concentration, as if she could transfer strength through touch. One afternoon, when Emma was at school and Sofia sat upright in bed for the first time without assistance, Nicholas brought her something. He placed it carefully in her palm, the worn prayer card, the one she had carried since that night on the highway. The one that had somehow survived gunfire and surgery and trauma. "Carlo found it in the parking garage," he said. "Among the shell casings and broken glass. It was pressed against your shirt, over your heart." Sofia held the image of Mary, weathered and faded, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "My mother gave this to me. Years ago. I thought I lost it." "You did not lose it. Some things, no matter how damaged the world becomes, remain with us." He sat beside her. "In 1 month, you will be strong enough to leave this hospital. I have prepared a penthouse overlooking the Sound. You will live there. Emma will visit every day. I will ensure the gallery you love requires your management. You will build the life that was stolen from you." She looked at him, this dangerous man with his careful hands and his impossible promises. "And what about you? I will love you while you heal. I will love you while you build. I will love you for as long as you will permit it. That is the only thing I have left to offer that matters." Sofia understood then that some people enter your life like a knife through darkness, cutting away the parts of you that accepted suffering. Some people, when you fall into blizzards, pull you into warmth without asking what you deserve. Some people choose to stand between you and bullets, and in doing so, change the entire architecture of your future. 1 year later, Sofia stood on the balcony of her penthouse apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, the city lights spreading below her like stars, and she was not the same woman who had frozen on a highway. Her shoulder bore a scar that had faded to silver. Her back carried marks that had become stories she could tell without shame. She wore a black silk dress because she had just come from opening her gallery exhibition, a space dedicated to artists who had experienced homelessness, funded entirely by Nicholas, managed entirely by her. The space was thriving. The art was selling. The lives were changing. The doorbell rang. Sofia opened the door to find Nicholas in a dark suit, his hair slightly damp from rain, his expression uncertain in a way she had never seen on his face. "Can we talk on the balcony?" he asked. They stood at the railing, the November wind carrying salt from the water, the smell of the city after rain. Nicholas gripped the railing, gathering something inside himself. "I love you," he said. "Not because of obligation or debt or the fact that you took bullets for Emma. I love you because you are the strongest person I have ever known, and you chose to stand in this life beside me anyway, knowing what I am." Sofia turned to face him. "What are you?" "I am a man who spent 37 years protecting people because I was not protected. I am a man with blood on his hands and a daughter who is alive because of you. I am a man who was frozen inside until a woman fell from a blizzard and taught me that some kinds of warmth are worth burning for." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, the diamond catching the city lights. "I am asking you to marry me, not because I believe I deserve you, but because I believe we deserve each other. Because Emma deserves a life where her father is happy. Because you deserve a man who will spend every day repaying the debt of your sacrifice, even though no debt could ever be repaid." Sofia was crying. She was not ashamed of the tears or the way they fell on the black dress or the way her hand shook when she reached for the ring. "Yes," she whispered. He slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close, his hand cupping the back of her head, careful even now of the scars, and kissed her like a prayer, like a promise, like a man who had learned that miracles were not something that happened to other people, but something that could arrive on a frozen highway in the form of a woman with $34 and infinite courage. 3 months later, the gallery hosted its opening night exhibition. Emma stood between them in her best dress, holding both their hands. Carlo and Sal watched from the background, smiling in a way that suggested loyalty had expanded to include witnessing this particular kind of happiness. The space was full of art and light and possibility. "Are you happy?" Emma asked, tugging Sofia's hand. Sofia looked at the child she had taken bullets for, at the man she had learned to love, at the life she had built from ruins. "Yes, sweetheart. I am happy. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places." If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.